when I listen to the remarkable historical music of the past, most perfectly a Mozart symphony, right? And the structure and the form of the classical period. And I know you're very attentive to, structure and form, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this is and elements and the use of elements of structure and form. But then I always say, well, does emotion sneak in there, or is emotion the emotion and feelings in music? Is it the outcome of that structure and form, or do we put the emotion is pushing the structure and form forward? I mean, structure and form is a rigid concept, right?
Yeah, that's
It's
right.
like binary. It's
Yeah.
like I'm going back to the technology. It's like it's a zero or it's a one, right? It's a plus or, but then so this allegiance to the structure and the form, but then we have this drive with the emotion. And does that structure and form help us focus the emotion? Does it help drive the emotion forward? You know?
It's an incredibly interesting question. This is a good three martini question for us
Oh,
next time
okay,
we're
good.
together.
I can't wait for that moment
Yeah,
again.
me too.
Right.
Um, I would say again that they dance with each other. As you said, I'm obsessed with structure and form. In fact, I oftentimes in my music I'm the cluster guy, and I think people focus on these hot chords, these moments, and for me those chords aren't so interesting. What's interesting is the minutes and minutes of intentional building to that moment that make that thing sparkle. And I feel that there are forms, like say the classical form, like Mozart, or forms that aren't even necessarily musical, that subconsciously induce a kind of emotional response in us. The first thing that I think of is the classic hero's journey, right? We've basically been telling the same story for 5,000 years since Gilgamesh. The idea that there's this ordinary world, that there's this boy who lives under the stairs in the closet, and then there's this inciting event. He's called an adventurer. He goes to Hogwarts. He finds out that he's the chosen one, goes through a series of escalating events, saves the world, and then brings catharsis, right? There's this defined story and movies and books, and we've been doing this for millennia. And I think you can take that form, I do this all the time, and then transpose it into music. So it's not a narrative piece, but just the shape of that journey in music. And I think people naturally feel the subconscious part of their mind ends up having a cathartic experience much the way they would if they were reading in real time or very specific narrative of the movie without knowing it, just hearing the music. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, therefore, Sonata-Allegro form.
Precisely. And
Right? I mean, when you were describing this, I was thinking, oh, recapitulation.
that's it. Yep.
Right?
And
Right?
then not to get too far into the weeds, but I also think that has to do with education. That what's beautiful about the sonata form and that the classicists really knew is it's also about teaching an audience. Here's a theme. Here's the theme again. Now we're going to play with the theme, and now we're going to return to the theme slightly changed, right, as if we've been transformed by the journey. It's a beautiful way of building the guidebook into the piece itself, so that you don't need to know anything. You start here, you end here, and you've been taken on the journey every step of the way.
Yeah, that's very helpful to me because as someone who's deep in policy and also committed to training others to be advocates, I always rely on theme, variations, practice. Now go out and create your own. Theme, variation, practice, celebrate. I call that the coda moment, right? And then go out and create your own.
I love
And
this.
it's the musical base for so much of our lives.